So, hello and welcome to another Flower Light Mystery School podcast. And with me again is Christine.
Hello.
And Charlotte.
Hello again.
So, this one is just a continuation from the most recent one that we've done, where we talked about the Book of Coming Forth by Light.
Yeah.
So, in this podcast, I just want to talk about, we touched on it really in the last one, which was the 7 seals of the Nile. So, just to go back a step or two for a second, the Book of Coming Forth by Light is the soul's instructions, for want of better words, on how to ascend from the 3D. That's just an abbreviation of what we talked about.
A really quick abbreviation of all things.
And its lower counterpart is the Book of the Dead, if you like, as I said. So the whole idea is that I touched on the Archon thing as well, and this is just a preamble, I suppose, to the 7 seals, but it's important. I touched on the Archon information that was found in the Nag Hammadi texts. So information regarding the Archons, it talks about how there was, what would you say, not, I suppose, an ulterior net to the one that we discussed earlier in our previous podcast. So the net I was discussing earlier, and I'll go through it again when we're talking about Edfu, was the net that was created by all the mounds upon which temples were placed. And remember I said they had to find the centre of the earth, and then from the centre they spanned out all the mounds upon which their temples will be created afterwards. So that was one net. And collectively, those that had that knowledge were known as the masters of the net. Right. Now, obviously, because they were building stone structures, they were also masons, stone masons. So that's where the whole mason thing. But anyway, that net, the original intention of that net was, as I said, to keep the connection between heaven and earth, above and below, the higher dimensions and the lower dimensions. So in other words, for all souls to be able to ascend out of the third dimension. Okay, that was the original net of the Neter, the sacred net. But then we're told in the ancient information through, for example, the Nag Hammadi text, that there was another net, indistinguishable from the net of the Neter, if you like. To the uninitiated, these nets are indistinguishable.
Yes.
So there's the net of the Archon. And the Archon, the best way to describe what are the Archon, because they're known by different names throughout all different ancient cultures. But the best way, as far as I've experienced, is to describe them as thought forms. They don't belong to any one person in particular. Like people who have negative thought patterns and thinking, they think it's only them, and they think it's something wrong with them, and they think it's their negative thinking, if you know what I mean. And a person's fear, this, and everyone's fear, they think it's their fear. What I'm saying is, fear and negative thinking and negative thoughts are an energy form in and of themselves. They don't belong to any one person. There you go. They exist in and of themselves. And so therefore, somebody, a grown-up man in fear will react the same way as a teenage girl who's in fear. There's not much difference between their reactions when they're in fear and how they act. So it will make everybody act the same way, if you know what I mean. And therefore, it's very easily controllable.
So it's like an influence?
Yeah, it's an energy in and of itself. The Archons are, the best way I can describe them is that they are energy beings. I don't know what to say really. Energy beings in and of themselves, but they manifest in your mind as thought forms. Do you know what I mean? Negative thought forms is what I mean.
Negative.
Now, if you consider that the human brain and mind, because your brain and mind are two different things, but okay, I'll say consciousness instead. If we say consciousness is a holographic projector, so in other words, it's our consciousness that projects what we call reality. So whatever level of consciousness you're in will determine what reality you're projecting for yourself to experience. That's what I mean. So when we're in lower level of consciousness, we're under the influence of archon consciousness, if you like. Archon thought forms. And they are the negative thought forms, fears, anxieties, all of those lower emotions like jealousy, revenge, all of those things. So what I'm saying is those archon thought forms can most easily manifest, let's say, and are present in the first 3 chakra, or first 3 levels of consciousness, or first 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So individually and collectively, you could say they would be what is in control in this present cycle, because we're in probably a dark age at the moment, you know what I mean? I mean, there's a massive awakening, as we mentioned earlier, as Christine was talking about earlier, and more people are coming on board with that awakening, you know. And the veil has been lifted, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, I said in 2020 we did a video, if you remember, on a sacred site at the Boy County Meath in Ireland.
Yeah.
Lockdown.
Yeah, and in that I talked about the weighing of the heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is part of the book of Coming Forth by Light.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I said that 2020 and everything that happened in 2020 with we know what happened anyway.
Like a planetary weighing of the heart.
Yes, I said it was all a planetary weighing of the heart, and everybody was making a choice and a decision as to where they would continue on to be and what they would experience based on the decisions they made back in 2020 and 2021. So a splitting of the timelines, if you like, because we exist everywhere at the same time.
Yeah.
Infinitely and eternally. So what I just want to say, and I'm just making it simple, I'm not saying there is only 2 nets, I'm just saying these would have been the main focus of the Mystery School Initiate. So the Initiate would have been aware that there are 2 nets. One in which the soul can become trapped.
Yes.
And that would be the net of the archons. The negative thought forms and patterns, and then there's the other net, which is the net of the neater. And I suppose that you could most closely refer to that as the Christ consciousness grid, or the higher consciousness grid, or the ascended consciousness grid.
Yeah.
And that ascended consciousness grid can be accessed when you move past the first 3 lower chakra, if you like.
Yeah.
When you move into the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown.
Yeah.
So the Book of Coming Forth by Light also contains the instructions for the initiate to be aware of the grid of the archon. It gave them instructions on that as well.
Of how to be wary of
avoid
it, or
how to escape from it.
Yeah, escape.
How not to be caught in it. All over the temple walls in Egypt you'll see images of nets with fish trapped in the net.
Wow.
Now, the fish in ancient Egypt symbolised the soul. So where you see the fish trapped in the net on the temple walls, it's talking about souls being trapped in the
false grid.
In other words, in the incarnation, the death and rebirth incarnation cycle. Remember I said in the previous podcast, the difference between death and ascension. So death is when you die and you go through a whole memory wipe, and you're reborn into a new body, and you start at ground zero. You have no memory or anything of anything. There's no gathering, there's no remembering of what you learned before. Yeah. You're on a clean slate again. Yeah. You've got to start all over again. Whereas ascension is to leave the body in the transition we call death, to experience what happens in that time when you leave your body, therefore knowing that you are eternal, coming back into the body, and now you become a master. Now you're a master, you're an ascended master. Wow. When you come back into the same body. And your focus from then on in is to give that information to other people. That's what you're here to do now from now on in. Yeah. Once you're an ascended master, you're part of what you would say the 144,000. Yeah. And as I said, the modern version of that mystery school process of ascension is when people have near-death experiences. So, most people don't understand that that's what a near-death, or, well, I prefer to say a death experience, but it's not near-death, it's death. But basically it's the same thing as what was being taught in the mystery schools. And the same thing has been described in Jesus' life and his ascension. Because Jesus was a mystery school initiate. And his final initiations took place at Giza, as we mentioned before. So just to say that there are those two nets, if you like. And to the untrained or uninitiated eye, both those nets are indistinguishable. So in the first three chakra, it's very easy to get trapped in the net of the Archon.
Because you're in that lower vibration. Yeah.
And to be honest, I would say that the lower three chakra are influenced mostly by the energies of the Archon.
Yeah, because they're meaning that
the overall energy of the third dimension is of manipulation, fear and control through manipulation and fear and the enslavement of now we go through cycles within the third dimension, but those cycles, as we go through them, naturally raise our vibration, so we're not in the third dimension anymore, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So as you vibrate higher and higher, you move out of the third dimension, and that's part of the science of Ascension. It was very highly advanced.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's equated to, like, as I said, quantum physics now, if you know what I mean.
Quantum entanglement.
And even, but okay, so the path of the mystery school initiate and the seven seals was such that the initiate was literally ascending, so they were consciously moving out of matter, above the third dimension, out of the risk of being caught in the net of the Archon, and into the higher consciousness grid, which was created by the Neter, as we said. So that brings me then, let's say, to the first seal. So the seven sacred centers, as I said, was known as the seven seals of the Nile, which represented the chakra. It also represents 7 days of the week. It also represents the 7 notes in an octave. So above and beyond everything I've said, we're also talking about the initiate learning about the time-space matrix. And when we get to like Karnak Temple, for example, we'll talk about the stretching of the cord and the masters of the internet, which was a teaching of how manifestation, how to manifest, how to take consciousness and bring it into matter. So this is what the initiates were
doing. And learning.
And the chakra.
And within, Christine, and within the whole time, in each chakra, as I said, because they were moving from the east bank to the west bank of the Nile, representing the male and the female, or the positive and the negative, throughout the whole process, they were balancing or reconciling those two.
To a neutral place.
And walking what you would say is the middle path. The child, the perfected being.
Yes, the divine child.
The divine child. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, part of going back and forth, like, say, the root chakra is in the male energy, you confront your fear of death, and then you go into the female energy, and you confront. So the lower chakras, they were doing that back and forth across the Nile.
Yeah. Oh yeah, confronting fears at every step of the way.
Yeah,
that was probably the single most important thing, was to confront fear, and also to know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, it's very easy. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have met gaslighters. And the main objective of a gaslighter is to get you to doubt your own reality.
Yes.
So if a person who comes up against a gaslighter, and gaslighting is black magic.
Yes.
And if a person comes up against a gaslighter, and the person doesn't know themselves very well, then the gaslighter can very easily make you doubt your own sense of reality.
Yeah.
I mean, gaslighting is about driving the other person insane.
Yeah.
So knowing yourself is very important, because if you don't know yourself, you're very easily manipulated.
Yeah.
If you're in fear of anything, you're easily manipulated. And if you're easily offended, you're easily manipulated. Yeah. So, because it means you're in your ego.
Yes.
If you get very easily offended by things people say or do, then you're easily manipulated.
Yeah.
Because you're taking things personally, you know? And that's the ego. So I suppose I haven't mentioned the ego up to now, but the whole thing was to get to move beyond the ego.
Yes.
Because it's the ego that exists in duality. So the reason they were trying to reconcile the male and the female, the equal and opposite, is to move beyond the ego. Because the ego only exists in duality. The higher self does not exist in duality. So if you think your ego exists in the first three chakra, the root, the sacral, and the solar, That's where the ego is. And you can ascend beyond the ego when you move into the heart.
Yeah.
So you can reconcile the two, and so therefore move out of the duality that we experience. And
in a way, sorry to interrupt you, Antoinette. The when I think of it right now, like the root chakra, the sacral, the root would be fear of survival. Sacral is fear of like I can't create the life I want. And solar plexus is I have no power. So that completely sounds like the 3D reality. They tell you that you are like a debt slave and you're subject to all these rules.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And so that is the archonic false grid.
That is, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It exists. That's good. That's good abbreviation.
Because everyone's been raised in that.
Yes.
Till now.
Yes.
And
all the religions, if you remember, I did the podcast, the very first one we did was Breaking the Spell.
Yeah.
And I said how the Ammon priesthood were the ones who, in this modern time, in this present cycle, who broke the cosmic order. Anyway, I'm not going to go over that again. But
it's there.
And they were the ones who set up everything that we would consider like religions, education, governments, all of those things.
Taxes, debt slavery, child slavery, it's all there.
Everything within the first 3 chakra, which is the first 3 dimensions.
Yes.
Is predominantly, I'm not saying everybody in it and everybody, but the third dimension in and of itself is predominantly fear, manipulation. Like, put it this way, life is the mystery school. Earth is a mystery school. Yeah. Our 3D experience is a mystery school. So what would be what I'm trying to say is the overall teaching of life in the 3D world is of fear, manipulation.
Yeah.
And it's to overcome them, is what I'm saying. It's not to become them, it's to overcome them.
No, that's it. Like the survival thing, the whole thing about the last 2 years is like, the fear of death.
Fear of death, yeah, absolutely. That's what's been used now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like completely to do with the archonic grid in terms of like the
and
medical
it's the fear of
system
survival as well because of all, shortages, whatever. So, it's the whole fear of survival thing as well.
So it's still here.
But you see, if you're a master manifestor and you can create anything, why do you need a middleman like money?
Absolutely. Money's got
or even food for that matter. And we had this conversation before as well.
Oh yeah.
About the fact that we don't actually need to eat.
Yes.
There's a lot of the
people don't understand
third dimensional aspect, which is an illusion. We're pure energy.
They've kept that from
plants
people.
Photosynthesize.
Yes.
They live on light.
Yes.
The whole idea of the philosophy of Akhenaten was nothing to do with worshipping the sun. It was as advanced as living on light.
Yes.
Being light. You are light. You don't need the middleman. No. We eat, I don't personally eat animals, but people eat animals.
No.
And food in general, you eat it because the food you're eating absorbs light.
Yes.
You eat plants because it absorbs light. You eat animals because it absorbs light. You're not actually looking to eat the animal. The animal is dead. The flesh is dead. The plant, when you cut it from its living environment and chop it all up, is dead. But it retains an element of the light that it lives on.
It does. You can see
that's what you're actually consuming.
When you see raw vegetables and raw food photographed compared to cooked food, you can see it completely.
That's what you're consuming.
The energy grid you're seeing in the raw food is completely much better than the.
Yeah, but you don't need to do that.
You don't need. Well, when you look at the rainbow body and the people in Tibet and the priests,
that's all about the light body teaching.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and that's what the
breatharians
great
who really live on breath.
Exactly. And that all comes from the ancient teachings of the mystery schools, the Great White Brotherhood, the Essenes, and the teaching of Jesus. Which Jesus was just a symbol of, as I mentioned,
the male initiates.
I mentioned already the male initiate. So let's start in the first.
Female. Sorry, can I just mention the females are Mary, Mary Magdalene, because she was a Mary, so she's the.
She would represent all the female lineage.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
to get back on track though.
Yeah.
Back on track.
So as we go through these anyway, as we go through the temples that I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to pick one temple in each sacred site, center in Egypt, and I'm going to, now obviously I can't give you loads of information because there's a lot contained in each temple, so I'm just going to abbreviate it if you like.
Point you in the direction.
But as we move through them, I want you to think about each level, each chakra, and apply it to yourself, and apply it to your own life and lessons, and see how it applies to each level of awareness that each chakra would relate to in your own life. As I tell you the information that's contained in each temple.
As it is the initiate who decides.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each temple. I'm going to tell you what the temple is talking about. Remember I said all the temples and sites together is the book of coming forth by light.
Yeah.
But each temple is a page or a chapter in that book.
Yeah.
So I'll just go through one temple and tell you what it says in that temple.
Great.
So
And then when we're finished, we can tie it together. But you can also apply it to each chakra in your own life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And see how it applies to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you want. If you don't.
You don't have to. No one's
Sit down,
forcing
put
you.
your feet up, have a glass of wine, cup of coffee. Think about, look out the window and watch the clouds if you want.
Exactly.
No, I'm just saying if it helps.
Yeah.
Follow. But anyway, so the first temple that we go to on the journeys when we go to Egypt is Edfu Temple. And Edfu Temple represents the root chakra. So I already mentioned in the last podcast we did that in Edfu Temple it tells the story of the battle, as they say, between Horus and Set. Now, I'm not going to get into it hugely because it's another big story, but one of the stories in ancient Egypt, or mythologies in ancient Egypt, that's again on the walls of the temples, is how Set tricked Osiris, who was his brother. Osiris and Set were brothers. And how Set tricked Osiris to get into a casket, which to me would be the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid, but anyway. And when Set got into it, he nailed it shut. And then the casket got thrown into the Nile, and the Nile, it floated up and it embedded in a tree. And then Isis, who was the wife of Osiris, came along, found it, took it out of the tree, found her, brought it out into the desert, and Set heard that she had found it, came, found the body, and chopped the body of Osiris up into 14 pieces. So she couldn't, because what Isis wanted to do was conceive a child with Osiris, but Osiris was now dead, trapped in the tree. So she brought him out into the desert anyway. Set found him again, chopped him up into pieces, and buried each different part of his body in a different place up and down along the Nile. And the 14th piece was the penis or the phallus of Osiris, and Set threw it into the river Nile. And it says that a fish ate it. Now, that's all very symbolic, of course, so put your own interpretation on that because it's too much to get into here. But a fish ate the penis, okay? Now, bear in mind that Isis wanted to conceive a child. So without the penis, it's going to be a bit difficult, yeah? So then there's a whole story of how... Now, the child that she wanted to conceive was Horus. So there's a whole story of how Isis called on Thoth, and Thoth, by creating a magical penis, first of wood, then of mud... No, sorry, first of mud, then of wood, then of gold. And through the magic of Thoth, and the creation of this magical penis, Isis conceived the divine child Horus, not through sexual intercourse. It was the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just telling you about that story. So in Edfu Temple, it talks about the battle between Horus, who was the child Isis was trying to conceive, and Set, who killed Osiris, who effectively was Horus's father.
Right.
Okay. So Horus is confronting Set in Edfu Temple. So you can look at that as the battle between light and dark.
Yeah.
You know, because Set is what became Satan
Yes.
in the Bible.
Yeah.
And
also he stands for like the dark.
the dark, yeah.
Sunset.
And Horus is symbolized is the sun.
Yeah.
The Son of God.
Yeah.
So Horus would be an early representation of Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's like the battle between God and the devil.
Yeah.
So this is the story that's told in Edfu Temple in the form of the battle between Horus and Set.
Yeah.
And Horus is defending his father, Osiris, who Set has killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bearing in mind, Horus wasn't even born when Set killed his father because he was the unborn child.
Yeah.
Now apply that to your root chakra,
Yeah.
and just it's going to mean something different things to everybody.
Well, the root is survival.
So just think about your root chakra and think about that story, the battle between light and dark.
Yeah.
Okay, so what it's telling us is that's where that takes place, in the root chakra. So, and also there's the story in Edfu about, it's called the Edfu Building Texts, and I did mention this in the last podcast as well, and it talks about the creation of the net, as we said. It tells about the coming into Egypt of the 7 sages, the builder gods, and how they founded the center of the earth, because the center had changed because of a cataclysm that had taken place. Mm-hmm. And that cataclysm had destroyed the 7 sages or the builder gods' homeland. So they left their homeland, came into Egypt. In other words, they weren't native of Egypt. Mm-hmm. And the reason they came into Egypt was because that's where the new center of the earth was after the cataclysm or the shift took place. Mm-hmm. And that new center is marked by the Great Pyramid. The 0 degree meridian line runs directly through the Great Pyramid and the sarcophagus and the King's Chamber. So it marks the exact center of the landmass of the earth. Mm. And from that exact center, they created a network of sacred mounds, all up and down along the Nile, but around the whole earth. And the Edfu building texts state that no temple or sacred site can ever be constructed unless it's placed on top of one of these sacred mounds. Now, I can tell you that every pyramid in Egypt every temple and pyramid, every site in Egypt has a mound below it. Wow. The Great Pyramid has a mound below it. I just want to say briefly, interject here, that this is the connection between Ireland and Egypt as well.
Yeah.
All the mounds in Ireland and England as well. And I suppose, like all over the world where you find these mounds, sacred mounds. So collectively that makes up the net of the neater that we're talking about, mm-hmm. And it says the Shemshu Hor were the ones who carried out this plan. So I'm briefly going through what's said in the temple. So there's 2 things that relate to the root chakra. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The battle between light and dark, and not just the battle, but the reconciling.
Yeah, the reconciling.
Yeah. Of those 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the story of the rebuilding of a previous civilization or consciousness that had taken place. Yeah. Now also embedded in there, of course, is the creation of the mounds, so we're talking about creation, not construction, and creation is about manifesting.
So like by thought
by
rather
thought
than by
thought.
Rather than by labor, which is
exactly. Anyway, just relate those stories to your root chakra. So also at Edfu, the story, so these are kind of the 3 main stories I want to say that comes out of Edfu. So we have the battle between the light and dark, we have the net and the creation of the net, and that's the net of the neater, the Ascension or Christ consciousness net, and we have the so these are all laid down in the foundations of the root chakra. And then we have the story of Zep Tepi. And the story of Zep Tepi, or the word Zep Tepi means the first time. And the first time, we're told, is a time when the gods and goddesses, the neater, walked with man or with humanity. So when the gods and goddesses were on the earth. And in the true interpretation of that, it's not when the gods and goddesses were on the earth, it's when we were in goddess consciousness.
Yes.
So they're the 3 things that are laid down. And it also says about Zep Tepi that it's a time when souls create the experience for the next cycle. They create the experience that their souls is going to have for the next cycle in Zep Tepi. So Zep Tepi is also like a 0 point.
Like the beginning.
A 0 point, the beginning of the end, the Alpha and Omega, the 0 point. The middle, the Stargate, the middle path, the out of matter, if you know what I mean. So all that is laid down, as I said, in Edfu Temple, in the root chakra. So we'll move to the second temple that we would visit, and the second seal, which is related to the sacral chakra, which of course is related to the womb and
birth.
Yeah. And of course, I don't know, did I say the root chakra, of course, would be related to, survival?
Yeah, survival.
Your survival and how that, to, did I? Okay. So the sacral chakra is related to sexually recreating yourself, I suppose, so there, childbirth, sexuality.
And also creativity.
the womb, so conception and you know, creativity, exactly. So in Esna Temple, the three deities are figures that are discussed. The three aspects, I'd rather say, than that that are discussed are Kum.
It's K-U-M.
Khumn, I think it's spelled.
Okay.
Neith and Heka. So again, it's a recreation of Isis, Osiris, and Horus.
Yeah.
The three, yes.
So you have Kum, would be the male. Neith was the female, and Heka was the child. Now this is in the sacral chakra, second chakra. So apply this to your own second chakra and your life, and what it means. Like, I don't just mean your 3D life, but your soul evolution, if you like, as well. So the sacred. This is the story that we say in Esna Temple. So Esna Temple is dedicated, as they would say, to Kum, who is the one who creates mankind on the potter's wheel. So you see Kum with two little small figures on a potter's wheel, a male and a female, like Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
You know? And it says that Kum creates the bodies of mankind from clay.
Yeah.
So it's like the story. It is the story. It's the basis of the story of the creation of Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
So Kum is a potter who creates the bodies of mankind on his potter's wheel. And it says that he imbues the patterns for the body of the Ka and the Ba. So you're talking about the patterns, like the blueprint for the DNA, and then we talk about, and also Kum is a water deity, so he would be associated with the waters of the Nile, which is associated with the waters of birth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So Neith is a female, a goddess, that's associated with weaving. So she wears a weaving shuttle on her head when you see an image of her. And but she's associated with weaving the net, the previous net we just talked about. And of course, you know, the whole weaving thing is to do with geometry.
Yeah.
It's to do with, as we mentioned, the net. And it's to do with like the veil, you know, the veil that exists between the dimensions, or
consciousness even, right?
Yeah. So all the goddesses really are one, if you know what I mean. All the different goddesses, like Isis, Hathor, Nephthys, Neith, Sekhmet, they're all different aspects of the female energy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so female nature, aspects of female nature.
But they're all really one, even though
they're all one, as same as the male.
Yeah.
The male are all just, all the different names of the different male gods are different aspects of the male energy, if you like. So, in the form of Neith, she's all about, you know, weaving the tapestry or the net of life, you know, the net of creation. And also Esna Temple is connected with the Essenes as well.
Yes.
And of course the Essene I mentioned were the Great White Brotherhood. So again, the stories relate again to the creation of mankind, the golden blueprint for the DNA, the blueprint of creation. You know, that's what Kum does. He imbues the bodies that he creates with the pattern of creation. The pattern of creation is DNA.
Yeah.
And you could say Neith weaves it all together, you know.
And they're both creators. They're
creators,
physically creating something.
Yeah.
Clay and
aspects of nature. Yeah.
So Kum would create the physical body and imbue the patterns, and then Neith weaves it together and imbues the body with the higher net of consciousness, if you like.
Yeah, like your if you, in terms of chakras, it would be your crown chakra, right? So
exactly. Yeah, the higher three.
Yeah.
And their child is Heka.
Yeah.
Now Heka in ancient Egypt means magic.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Oh.
So think about that. The child of Kum, the one who creates the body on the potter's wheel, and imbues it with the pattern of creation, the DNA. And then Neith, who imbues the ability for higher consciousness and weaves all together. The product of the two of them
is magic.
Is a child called magic.
Yeah, I love it.
Hecka.
It's a kind of magic.
Yeah, beautiful, isn't it?
It's great.
So again, relate that to your second sacral chakra.
Yeah.
And just really, each one of these should be meditated on, I suppose, because that's what we would do. You take the information that's on the wall, and it's going to be different for everybody, but it's going to mean something to everybody.
Yeah.
In relation to their own life, their own aspect of survival, their own aspect of birth, or their struggle maybe with birth, or giving birth,
and their connection to the creativity,
or meeting somebody to have a child, or
absolutely.
I mean, there's many ways you can interpret. So that's just the first two chakra and the first two temples that we visit on our journey when we go physically to Egypt and through the temples. So now we're going to move into the third seal. And again, there's a lot more about these temples. It's just obviously for the podcast. We're just doing it, yeah. So the third temple then, or the third seal rather, would be, the third area would be
Solar.
Luxor and Karnak.
Yeah.
Now, all the sites in Luxor represent the solar plexus. But the two temples I'm going to talk about, as all the sites in Edfu represent the root, all the sites in Esna represent the sacral, and all the sites in the area of Luxor represent the solar plexus. So the two temples I'm going to talk about are Karnak and Luxor, because really they're one temple.
Yeah.
It's only in modern times they've been kind of considered to be two different temples.
Really?
Yeah. And they actually just recently, I think it was last year,
it was connected again.
They were reconnected again. The Avenue of the Sphinxes was reopened, which connects them as one temple again.
Yeah.
That's very important.
That is very important, actually.
It is, yeah, it is. And you'll see why a bit more when I...
So isn't that interesting that quite recently, when the energy is rising again, 3D temples are reconnected?
Oh, yeah, because they never go offline.
Yeah, I know. But I mean,
for the fall away.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
But we can now walk that path between the two. The two temples, which you couldn't do before.
Yeah, which is very significant because it only happened in 21, I think it was.
And would you walk from Karnak to Luxor or Luxor to Karnak?
Karnak to Luxor.
That's what
I'll explain why now. So, between Karnak and Luxor temple, as I said, that's the solar plexus. So in Karnak temple is known as the temple of constant creation because so many people added, if you like, to the temple.
Yeah.
To the building of the actual temple.
Wow.
Over the period of time, if you know what I mean. And Luxor temple would be built in a kind of a cruciform shape, a cross shape, if you like. And at the very centre of it sits the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary. And on the 21st of December, like Newgrange, for example, the light from, it's called the heliacal rising of Sirius. Sirius disappears for 72 days below the horizon line in Egypt. And when it rises again on the 73rd day, it rises in the morning with the sun. Wow. And it shines down the axis way of Karnak temple, what it would have done in the ancient time. And it shines down the axis way of Karnak temple. And when the sun and Sirius are combined, the light that it shines is red. So it would have shone this light down the axis way and illuminated the inner sanctuary, which for all the rest of the year is in total darkness.
Wow.
Until for 2 or 3 minutes this light shines in and illuminates the whole inner sanctuary with this red light.
Wow.
From the combined energies of the star Sirius and our sun. Yeah. Now, if you're just cast your mind back to the other podcast we did, I said we're told literally that when you ascend you become a star.
There you go.
The pharaohs ascended to the stars.
Yeah.
To become a star.
Yeah, into the Holy of Holies.
Because they never forgot that they were.
Yeah. So
it's very interesting when you know what the layout of Luxor temple is meant to be as well.
Well, one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, where are you? You know, you think you're here in a body, but that's a whole other thing. But you think you're here inside your body, but where are you really? That's it.
You're a star in the cosmos.
You can only observe a dimension by looking down on it. So you have to be observing from a higher perspective.
Exactly, yeah.
Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see what you're seeing.
That's it.
You think you're looking from the inside of your eyes out, but you're not.
Yeah, but the point is, you see everything here with a limited field of vision. It's flipped upside down, and then your third eye is what's looking straight up.
But to be able to see 3 dimensions, you've got to be observing from a higher point.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Your awareness has to be higher. You have to be a step ahead of yourself.
Yeah, that's it.
So in Karnak Temple, if you think of that inner sanctuary, yeah, and the temple itself being in the form of cross, and the light of the sun and Sirius combined illuminating the inner sanctuary, the inner chamber.
Yeah, in Karnak, yeah.
It's almost like the sun on the cross, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like
You
the
know,
S-O-N
the Son of God
or the
on the cross.
S-U-N.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So, Karnak Temple is also built on a kind of a spiral. So if you went from the inner sanctuary and traced like the chambers and temples and parts of the temple, rather, as they were constructed, it's created like on a 5 spiral.
Wow.
Like on a vortex?
Yeah. Well, all the sites are built on a
On
vortex,
vortexes.
but this geometrically, this is created like the chambers that cascade out from the inner sanctuary are golden rectangles,
There you go.
and they cascade out in such a way that they create a 5 spiral.
Wow.
And the 5 spiral is the golden spiral, as they say, but it's the spiral upon which consciousness descends and ascends.
That's right.
Both ways, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the vortex energy. It goes
So-
up and it goes down.
And so in Karnak Temple, also the story of, there's the information of those who stretch the cord. Remember I said I
Yes,
mentioned that. So it talks about stretching the cord. Stretching the cord is what was done when the dimensions of the temples were being laid down. That's in the outer teaching, if you like, but the more symbolic, the more higher level meaning to that. The higher teaching, should I say, to stretching the cord, is showing the student or initiate how you take consciousness and bring it into its lower form of resonance and stretch it out to create what we call matter. Manifestation, in other words.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
stretching of the cord was a very highly advanced, complex teaching of manifestation, of how consciousness becomes matter. Consciousness is matter.
Wow.
So the teaching in the temple of Karnak was also about the masters of the internet. So those who knew this information were known as the masters of the internet. So if we look at Karnak Temple in relation to Luxor Temple, as I said, because they're connected by what we were talking about, the Avenue of the Sphinxes, which is a long walkway, which up to last year was closed down.
Yeah.
There was actually houses built on top of it and everything.
Disconnect, yeah.
It was disconnected. Now that makes sense when you think, okay, so Karnak Temple talks about the descent of consciousness into matter. The Son of God descending into matter.
Yeah.
The whole story I told you about how the inner sanctuary lights up with the sun, the light of the Son of God, Sirius and the combined light. That's the male and the female.
Yep.
Combined to create that light on the cross, the sun on the cross. Which we're a good time to be talking about this now, weren't we? Easter.
With Easter,
Yes,
yeah.
Easter.
So if you can imagine, then that light comes down in the 5 spiral, the golden spiral.
Yeah.
Okay. So think of the 2 temples. The light then descends from Karnak Temple down the Avenue of the Sphinxes.
Wow.
And into Luxor Temple. All right. Now Luxor Temple is known as the temple of man, but not any kind of man. And I don't mean a man, I mean mankind.
Yeah.
And Luxor Temple is known not just of mankind, but of perfected mankind.
Yeah.
So Luxor Temple is the temple of the perfected being or the perfected child. Now remember, the perfected child was the perfected child of Heka and Kum, Kum and Neith. The perfected child of Kum and Neith was Heka, who's magic.
Yeah.
The perfected child of Isis and Osiris was Horus,
Right.
who's the sun.
Yeah.
More correctly, it's not the sun, it's the light of the sun.
Yeah, the light of the sun, yeah.
Remember, we're talking about light really here. So Karnak Temple refers to consciousness before it descends into matter. Yeah, perfected, remembered consciousness. So that then descends down the Avenue of the Sphinxes, which, as I said, was only opened last year, which is on time for the awakening that's happening the activation of these teachings in now, because there's never been a more important time.
Yeah.
This is the time for these teachings now.
Yeah.
They were left for this time.
Yes.
So so as I said, the Archon net exists in the 3 dimensions below, where people have been up to now. But the time there's a timeline split now where we're moving into higher. I think most people listen to this will know.
We'll know, yeah. We're
Anyway,
on the higher
that we're-
timeline of the multi-dimension.
So this is where it happened between Luxor and Karnak Temple, where the cosmic order was broken.
Oh, yes.
Okay, but it's re-established now.
Yes.
And a sign of that, or a symbol of that, is that the Avenue of the Sphinxes has been reconnected again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
So
you
that's a very good visual for people to see.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a big ceremony that was done. You'll find it on YouTube if you
Yes.
want to look.
Yeah.
There was a big ceremony when they opened it.
Yeah, and it was at nighttime. So
It was at
the
night,
light,
yeah.
The light went all the way up.
Yeah,
the
they do a
road.
good
It's
sound and
beautiful.
light show at Karnak Temple as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is good. It's cheesy. We've seen it a million times, but it is good. Like when you see it. But
For the first time.
For the first time. So Luxor Temple is known as the temple of the perfected being. Now, if you look from an aerial view down at Luxor Temple,
Yeah.
it's like a human being lying on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay, but the human being lying on the ground with 1 foot forward. So what that means is they're moving, they're walking forward. So in ancient that means you're animated.
Yeah.
You're in movement. You're in transition. You're in evolution.
Yeah, if you see
It's not-
pharaohs
it's not
with
just
1 foot
static.
forward.
It's moving. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you look from an aerial view down at Luxor Temple, it's the image of a big person lying on the ground. And when you walk into Luxor Temple, you enter the temple through the 2 feet of that person.
Yeah, you do.
So the whole story that's told in Luxor Temple is the conception, the birth, and the growth of the divine child, the perfected being. Now, Luxor Temple is a holographic fractal representation of the entirety of the 7 seals that run up and down along the Nile. Because in Luxor Temple, you have the 7 seals. So Luxor Temple, because it's an image of a person, also contains the 7 chakras.
Haha.
So when you walk into Luxor Temple, you walk in through the feet, as I said, up through the legs, and up then into the root chakra
Yeah.
of the temple, into the sacral chakra, and as you can imagine, as you go, so you actually enter into the temple through the root chakra,
Yeah.
and you exit the temple through the crown chakra.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's like a fractal
A fractal
of what
of
you're
the
doing.
entire
Process.
journey.
And
Yeah.
and as you do that, the level rises physically as well.
Yes, it does. Yeah, the
Yeah.
level of the temple rises.
So that
So
represents
you're walking
dimensions.
an upward slope as
Wow.
you go as well.
An incline, yeah.
Now the ascension flame is there at Luxor Temple. So Luxor Temple was also known as the Ascension Temple of Serapis Bey. Now Serapis Bey is another name for Osiris. And Luxor and Karnak Temple were also the home of the Great White Brotherhood. Now we mentioned the Great White Brotherhood and the Essene were the same people teaching the same thing, the teaching of the light body and ascension. Which is what Jesus was teaching, as Jesus was, as I said, a symbol of the male lineage of the masters of the mystery schools. But so
Some people also say that it's connected to Metatron, Luxor Temple.
Metatron is to do with Thoth as well. It's
That's
to do
what
with
I
the
thought.
geometry of like
So-
meter and Metatron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah,
It
no,
just
no,
came-
no, yeah,
reminded me.
I was going to say something there. It's like an enemy. Oh yeah, so so in Luxor Temple, the story of the conception of the divine child is told, and the growth, and as I said, the conception, the birth, and the growth of the divine child. So, in the part of the temple where the story of the conception of the divine child is told, is in the part of the temple that is the head. In the part of the temple that contains the third eye. That's where
I remember it, yeah.
the story of the conception of the divine child is inscribed on the walls.
In the third eye.
In the third eye of the temple. So that's telling you conception takes place not in the womb, in the third eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's thought, your thought.
Yes.
Into,
Thoth, yeah. Metatron.
yeah,
Thoth.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly
Thoth and
it.
Metatron are the same.
Thought.
So, so it's telling you that the divine child, the perfected being, the ascended being, coming back into the same body, we'll say. The conception takes place in the third eye. That's telling you the ascended being gives birth to itself.
Yeah.
You know?
There you go.
Now, the concepts, the parts of the teaching that's dedicated at Luxor and Karnak Temple, at Luxor Temple, is Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. Remember, we had Kum, Neith, and Heka. We had Isis, Osiris, and Horus. Now, in Luxor Temple, we have Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. So, Amun would be the male, Mut would be the female, and Khonsu in this instance is the child. Okay, the divine child.
Yeah.
So on the story on the wall, in Luxor Temple, is told the conception of the divine child, and on the walls of the temple it tells how Thoth came and announced to Mut that she was going to conceive a divine child, but not through the normal process. And there's an actual image on the wall of Luxor Temple showing sperm.
Yeah, I remember that.
Showing a single sperm. And it's coming out of a penis. So there's no denying what it is. And what it's telling you is, this is not how this child was conceived.
Right.
This child was immaculately conceived, not through this process.
Yes.
It's a divine child,
Yeah.
not conceived through sex.
No.
This story is told on the walls of Luxor Temple thousands of years before Jesus ever walked the earth.
There you go.
And in that instance, Amun, Mut, and Khonsu would be Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Yeah, I was going to say, where have we seen that story before?
Or sorry, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus.
Well, they're
Jesus is the child.
They're saying Thoth.
So Jesus would be Amun.
Yeah.
Mary would be Mut.
Yep.
And Khonsu would be Jesus.
Yeah, Khonsu was Jesus. Yeah.
So the divine child, again, that's the story
Yeah.
being told again in Luxor Temple.
Yeah.
So think about that in relation to your solar plexus, because your solar plexus is about your power in the world, in the third dimension.
Yeah, your inner sun.
Yeah, it's about your power in the third dimension. How much of it do you have or not have? You know what I mean? How much of it is being controlled? How much of it do you control? You know?
Yeah.
It's whatever you think. I mean, it's you're the person, the listener, is the one who needs to interpret what it means for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, as I said, I'm only giving you slips, because kind of small bits of information as to what each temple relates to. But Luxor Temple, as I said, was the Ascension Temple of Serapis Bay, because, as I said, it contains all of the 7 chakras. So the Ascension could take place there.
Yeah.
I mean, it can take place in any temple, but Luxor Temple was a fractal of the entirety of the 7 seals. And it was the home of the Great White Brotherhood, who is the origin of the Essenes, if you like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then we move from Karnak and Luxor Temple into the 4th seal, and the 4th seal is the heart. And the temples related to that is Abydos and Dendra, those 2 temples.
Both of them.
Both of them, yeah. So the temple we visit in Abydos is Seti, the first temple. And in Seti, the first temple, the story of the conception of the divine child is again told. The story of the creation of the magical penis, if you remember, I was telling you, is told in that temple. And Abydos in ancient Egypt was a place of pilgrimage, if you like, for ancient mystery school initiates. It was a very important place because you remember I said the body of Osiris was chopped up into 14 pieces and each piece was buried in different places. So it's in Abydos that the head of Osiris was buried. Now the story says that Isis and Nephthys was Isis' sister and Isis was married to Osiris. Remember we said Isis wanted to conceive Horus, but Osiris had been chopped up. So Isis and her sister Nephthys went about collecting all the pieces of Osiris' body, which they did. And they brought them all to Abydos, where the head of Osiris was. And it was in Abydos that they put all the pieces of the body of Osiris together, and they wrapped them in bandages. Thereby Osiris became the first mummy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was there that Osiris was raised from the dead by the magic of Thoth and the creation of the penis and the conception of the divine child.
Mm-hmm.
That story is told in the Bible as the raising of Lazarus
Yeah.
Yes.
by Jesus. Okay. Just as a side note as well, it's in the Seti First Temple where you'll see what's called the Pharaoh's helicopter.
Yeah.
And that is there on the walls, as we've all seen.
We have.
As another interesting side note, there's a whole book in search of Seti. It's about a woman called Dorothy Eady who used to live there.
Oh, she's fascinating.
Just if anybody wanted to read it, it's very interesting. But so out the back of the Seti, the First Temple, it's a really beautiful temple, and it's in that temple as well where we do the light activations.
Yes.
Yes. Amazing.
Yeah. And so out the back of the temple, you find the temple, the Osirian. And the Osirian temple is a temple that's 50 foot below Seti First Temple, so straight away it's a much older temple. And it's on the walls of these huge granite stones, perfectly cut 90-degree angled granite stones that you find burnt into the stone almost.
Wow.
Is the symbol of the flower of life. But it's not just one symbol, it's the whole flower of life being built up. It's just, most of it's on the back of the pillar, and most people can't see it from where they stand. But
Yeah, there's like 3 of them on one side together.
oh, there's more. The whole thing is built up over the. But so that's where we find the symbol of the flower of life. Now that's in the heart chakra. So if you think of the information that's contained in the Seti First Temple, as I said, it's the raising of Osiris.
Yeah.
It's the story of the putting back together. So when you put something back together, you remember it.
Yeah.
When you take it apart, you dismember it.
Yes.
When you put it back together, you remember it. So the remembering of Osiris, putting him back together, he becomes the first mummy.
Yeah.
The bandages of the mummy represent the flesh,
Yeah.
encapsulating the spirit.
Yes.
You know.
Wow.
So you can see that the raising of Osiris means the raising from flesh. Yeah. So that's all told in the heart. And then the head of Osiris. So the head is where the records are held, isn't it? The memories, the information.
Yeah.
So that's where the head of Osiris is. And the symbol of that information, as I said, we found is the flower of life.
Yeah.
The flower of life contains all the geometries of creation.
Yes.
The golden spiral, the pi ratio, the phi ratio, which creates the golden spiral.
Yeah.
All the geometries, the sphere, the hexahedron, the icosahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron.
Yeah.
All what Plato and Pythagoras and, would have been studying.
Yeah.
And as we see, it's the geometries of creation, how atomic and molecular structures form. And
Yeah, the quantum realm.
so this is all highly advanced.
Yeah.
So if you think this is found in the location of the heart.
Yeah.
And now, as I said earlier as well, all these temples are aligned to stars. So they all have information about what stars they're aligned to and constellations. But that's a whole other thing. Then we go to Dendra Temple. And Dendra Temple is dedicated to Hathor.
Yeah.
And Hathor is to do with sound. To do with sound, music. Also childbirth. The name Hathor means womb of Horus. Hat means is womb, Hor is Horus. So the womb of Horus. So the Dendra temple would have been dedicated to childbirth, for example. There's the birthing chamber of Isis there, where it says that's where Horus is born. The divine child was born at Dendra temple.
Wow.
So the Hathors are associated with the Pleiades, the seven sisters.
Yeah.
And they're associated with sound.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of the Hathor temple would be in relation to how sound, like cymatics, how sound affects matter.
And music.
And as I said, it's also the place of the birth of the divine child. The temple itself is connected with Sirius, the star Sirius. And in Dendra Temple, you also have the zodiac, the Dendra zodiac. And it's there in that zodiac where we can see that, again, this is another thing for a different podcast. It's too much to talk about now. But in the Dendra zodiac, as in the Great Pyramid, it shows how there's missing precessional time. I know it's hard to think about how missing time, but what I mean is that stars weren't in the place where they should be at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
Which again talks about what was talked about the cataclysm that apparently took place. So the Hathor temple it's another beautiful temple, you know. It's
gorgeous.
Absolutely beautiful. And on the ceiling of the temple, you see all the stars of the zodiac. So it talks about, you know, the boat of millions of years and, you know, Osiris traveling through his boat. But it's all related to information about the stars, which, as I said, it's too much to get into with this.
Would that have anything to do with like the heart chakra and like the weighing of the heart and anything?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah.
Stars?
Yeah. As I said, the soul ascends to become a star.
Yes.
So knowledge of the sky was just as important as knowledge of...
Absolutely, yeah.
That's why they made a mirror image of the sky on the ground.
Yeah.
But the important thing, the part of the sky that they were making a mirror image of in the creation of the net was the part of the sky that they referred to as the duat. So it was a particular part of the sky, if you know what I mean. So
the sky at night when they were asleep, the duat?
The duat was the place they journeyed through to get to the Neter land or the Neverland, the land of the immortal. Yeah. So that was the image they were placing on the ground.
Yes. Yeah, and
as the initiate journeyed through it to get to the land of the immortal, if you like.
Yeah.
So
so you don't get lost.
Yeah. So
once you make it past Amit, then you get to be a star.
Yeah. So so Dendra Temple is related, as I said, to it's feminine. It's very much in the feminine energy.
Yes.
And related to the birth of the divine child. It said it's the place where Isis gave birth to Horus, because Isis is the mother of Horus. Yeah. Osiris is the father.
The temple that's there now is absolutely spectacular, but it's actually a Greco-Roman one sitting on top of the original one.
It would have been built on an older temple, which would have been built on a mound.
When we went the last time, he showed me the actual pillars of a bit of a floor that was taken away from the temple underneath it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then underneath, of course, where you can climb in Dendra Temple, there's the crypts that are underneath.
Yes.
So when we go down underneath the temple, if you remember, we went down there.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
And down there is what's called the Dendra light bulbs.
Yes.
So you see these things that look like, some people say crux tubes, or what are they called again? Cathode ray tubes.
Cathode ray tubes.
Which are used in TVs to generate images and things like that. But it certainly is evidence of high technology.
Yeah.
You know, now a lot of people will say it's not. It's to do with, I don't know. I mean, there's the standard Egyptological view is it's a lotus flower. I don't know, but
well, I personally feel going in the mall, like you can see in the Dendra Temple at the top, they've recently redone the whole ceiling because it was blackened from when it was
there's more of them in the temple.
But below is pristine. There's no smoke or anything like. So there was never fire down there.
I think below is from an older temple.
Yeah. The crypt underneath it. That makes sense.
I think it was from an older temple. So there there you can see, and the images on the walls is like, I mean, it's amazing, you know. So Abydos and Dendra relate to the heart chakra. So if you think of the information from those two places, relating to the heart, you know, and as I said, it's when you come out of the first three that you move into the higher net, if you like.
Yes, yeah.
Out of the Archon net, where you can be trapped, you know.
Yeah.
Because once you're trapped in the first three, you keep coming back. So
the
problem is from going. The problem is trying to get out of the solar into the heart. Yeah. That's where the difficulty is, you know.
That's when you hear people talking about ascension when they say if you've made it to your heart chakra. First of all, the Egyptians are right. Your heart chakra is the intelligence area. That's where everything. But if you're stuck below the solar plexus, you're just going to keep being recycled and recycled because you haven't risen above that. Someone's taking your energy, taking your power. You haven't taken your power back.
Well, that's it. It's the whole thing about weighing the heart, because the seat of consciousness was in the heart, not in the brain. In ancient Egypt. So, and the heart does put out like your heart puts out an electrical field. Your brain puts out an electrical field. Your heart puts out a magnetic field.
Yes.
You know.
So and that's the feminine energy.
It's the feminine and masculine, yeah. So so then move into the throat chakra. So the area of the throat chakra is Saqqara. That's the place that we would go to on the journey.
I love Saqqara.
Is that off Giza? Like it's
it's about 20 minutes from Giza.
It's a bit of a leap, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a plane journey. It's a plane ride from Luxor to Saqqara. So at that point of the journey, to get from the heart, as we say, to the throat, we have to take a plane journey and get to Cairo when we're on the journey. So
because
Saqqara.
It is a part of that
Cairo.
whole. You can see Giza from Saqqara when you're standing there. The pyramid of Djoser.
The
step pyramid.
Well, I don't know that you can see the step pyramid, but you can see like the bent pyramid and Dashur and the red pyramid.
You can in the distance, when we went down to the underground.
Maybe I've never seen the step. Or maybe you can. I've never seen the step pyramid from Cairo, from Giza. I know you can see the other ones all right, but I don't know. I don't recall seeing the stepped one. Maybe
I meant the other way. Looking from the step pyramid, you can see.
Oh yes, yeah.
From the
Great
Serapeum,
Pyramid.
You can see them way far in the distance.
In the Great Pyramid, yeah. You probably would, yeah. So at Saqqara, then you have the architect of Saqqara was Imhotep, and Imhotep was known as the great architect. He's the one, say all doctors take Hippocratic oaths. Well, Hippocrates took all his medical knowledge from Imhotep.
Wow.
So Imhotep was a great physician. Part of the Essenes or the Great White Brotherhood were called the Therapeutae, and they were the physicians. Yeah.
There you go.
So at Saqqara Saqqara is a sound healing center, and it represents the throat chakra. So they say it was created for the pharaoh Zoser, and he's apparently buried below Saqqara. So the more interesting aspect of that to me is Imhotep, the architect, and the creation of the stepped pyramid itself. And the whole sound healing complex, the chambers. There's different sound healing chambers. And so you could say it was I mentioned like cymatics earlier, how sound affects matter. So at Saqqara it would be the aspect of Heka, which we mentioned earlier as well, the child of Neith and Kum. Heka is magic, but Saya, there's another female character called Saya, which is to do with words, the spoken word.
Okay.
And when you put Saya and Heka together, it's the magic of the spoken word, the magic of the word.
Ooh.
So this is what's at Saqqara. The information at Saqqara is not just the information of the fact that we are vibration. As beings, we are sound and light vibrating, and ultimately we are light. We're not physical matter as we think we are. So as we move out of the more dense bodies, we go into the higher, like ice, water and steam. They're all the same thing, but they're in different states.
Yes,
So if you think of ice as very dense, water as fluid, and then steam as air, but they're all the same. They come from the same thing. They are the same thing.
Yes.
In different states.
Yeah.
So we as consciousness, in our very dense state, we're like ice.
Yeah.
Then we move up the ladder into our solar plexus, going into the heart, we become water, more fluid.
Yeah.
And then when we move up into the
throat
and the third eye and the we become the gas, the steam.
Yeah, steam, clouds.
So we're the same thing. We've just changed our state.
Yeah.
Wow.
So how do you change the state of water? You turn up the temperature. Yeah. You get it, make it hotter.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's basically what the whole of alchemy is about. How does a physical body become a light body? You make it hotter. And a simple way of saying that is you agitate the physical molecules, in other words, the atoms and the electrons in the atom, and you accelerate them beyond the speed of light.
Wow.
And you do that with your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the teaching.
Yeah.
And that's like boiling the water so it becomes steam.
Yes.
We're doing the same thing.
Wow.
That's what's happening right now.
It's not that you're becoming something else. You're changing your state.
Yeah.
And when you change the state, in other words, rate of vibration, it vibrates in a different way, like ice, water, and steam.
Yeah.
So
That's
as we
perfect
move up the
analogy.
ladder, the 7 seals, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're going from ice, which is our physical, to water, to state, the ascended.
Wow. That's amazing.
So at Saqqara is also, and again I'm just going to go through these quickly, is the Pyramid of Uranus, where the entire of, again, the Book of Coming Forth by Light, and what the Egyptologists refer to the spells, the magic spells out of the Book of Coming Forth by Light, but it's really all this information. And it's inscribed on the walls.
The pyramid.
In the
text.
Pyramid of Uranus, not in the stepped pyramid.
Yeah.
In the Pyramid of Uranus.
Mm.
And also at Saqqara is the Serapeum, which contain these absolutely enormous diorite and dolerite boxes.
Wow. They're just mind-blowing.
Sarcophagus, which about, I don't know, they say they're for bulls, the sacred bull, These things are enormous. And anyway, how they could even be made is...
How could they get them?
But you need to
them
get an
out?
image of them, so to look at them, because they're absolutely... Well, actually, you need to go and see them because they're amazing, and really you can see how advanced. I think the lids alone are about 80 tons.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's
even
some
more underneath as well.
major advanced technology that created them,
Oh, yeah.
So, so relate the whole information there.
And that's to the throat.
So that's to do with your throat chakra. And as I said, it's to do with sound healing, okay? It's also to do with the magic word.
Yeah.
The magic of words.
Yes.
So your sound is your voice and what you speak. So what you speak is what you... Okay, I'll give you an example. In this ancient mystery school information, it says, the universe was brought into being by Thoth singing it into being.
Yeah.
That's right.
Speaking it or singing it into being. So you're talking about the creation of matter through sound.
Yeah.
So the teachings of Saqqara and the throat is about the sacred sound, the magic of the word, being able to bring... In the beginning was the word. The word was with God, and God said, let there be light.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the word made flesh. The word made flesh means consciousness manifest.
Yeah.
Because that's what all this is about. The whole teaching of the mystery school is about.
Is this ascension mechanics?
And at every step of the way is confronting the fears, as we said.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm going through these very quickly.
Yeah.
Quickly. Probably not so quickly, but anyway. So we're going to move on now because it is getting a bit long. I didn't really mean to make this one.
No, we're almost there. Now we're in the third eye.
We always intend that.
So we have to move in now to the third eye. And the third eye is the 6th and the 7th.
Combined.
And really you could say the 8th as well.
Right.
Combined, exactly. And that is in the area of where the greatest mystery school of all was, and that's at the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
So the Giza Plateau is the third eye and the crown chakra combined, if you like. And so
Rostau.
And Rostau was the place of the weighing of the heart. Rostau was the stargate between, it was the exit point of the third dimension.
Yeah.
So at that point you ascend beyond the third dimension. And as I mentioned, it says you become a star. You ascend to the stars and become a star.
You go back to being a star.
So now this, I mean, you could do a million podcasts on the Great Pyramid, but the Great Pyramid embodies so much information, so much. It's a scale model of the Earth, and it's also a scale model of your brain. And for example, the pineal, pituitary, and thymus in the brain, which collectively make up the third eye.
Wow.
So it was there that the final initiation would take place in the Giza plateau, in the Great Pyramid, sorry, on the Giza plateau. The weighing of the heart took place there, and the recitation of the negative confessions. So in other words, the one for initiation had to go into the hall of judgment. They had to recite the negative confessions, which is, I have not lied, I have not. So basically what that's telling you is that once you reach that point, you have to be very pure. You have to be resonating. Well, you would be at that stage, because you're you know, in the third eye, you've made it that far, you know, on the mystery school journey, if you like. So you're in that high level of consciousness. Remember, we said each chakra is a level of consciousness. So all along, the initiate would have been going out of their body and coming back into their body at each stage of this journey.
Oh yeah, confronting the fear of death.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist.
And it was done in all sorts of different ways. But the final initiation at the Giza Plateau was where the initiate would go into the Great Pyramid. There was various different initiations that took place in there, but the final one was to lie on the sarcophagus. And you would be there on your own, and this is what Napoleon
he would never talk about what happened to him.
But anyway, and the initiate would lie for 3 days. They would go out of their body on the Ascension spiral that runs up through the Great Pyramid, and ascend out into the cosmos. They would go back to their original state, which is light.
Wow.
They would then, that's the final point where they have a choice now.
Yeah.
Even though they've been going in and out of the body up to now, it's at this point in the Great Pyramid where they will either decide to come back into the body, or they will stay out for good and go on to a different evolution or a different. So that's why it was the final decision point, if you like. So if you came back into the body, then you came back as an ascended master.
Yeah.
And your only function from there on was to be a teacher and to give this information to other people.
Yeah.
And you were part of what's known as the 144,000, and you were here then to activate and awaken the others that are here to help them move through.
Yeah.
And that was the role that you would have chosen. If you chose to stay out and continue on your journey in different dimensions, or there was no judgment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was only your own choice.
Yeah.
Because you return to what you are, which is the eternal light.
Yeah.
So there isn't who you judging. Who's judging you? You're judging you.
Exactly.
You know? So the final initiations then, as I said, were taking place at Giza, and all the geometries of creation are built into the Great Pyramid. It's a highly complex structure, and the amount of information that's built into it, highly advanced information that wasn't meant to have been known at the time, you know.
Yeah.
Which clearly was known, you know what I mean? It was, they were physically built into the Great Pyramid, you know. So
and what about we were talking earlier about the kind of air shafts in the Great Pyramid?
Well, the reason I'm not saying so much about that is because there's so much to say that it really is for another podcast. But what I want to say is the Great Pyramid really is the book of coming forth by light in stone, because everything that's contained on all the temple walls is built into the Great Pyramid, and can be understood if you can translate the numbers and the units of measurements and all of those things that's built into it. But as I said to you, it's built in the direct centre of the earth. It's a scale model of the earth on a scale of 1 to 43,200. And it literally, through what they call the air shafts or star shafts, connects. The Great Pyramid is also like a clock which points to certain stars at certain times, or keeps track of stars throughout the time.
Wow.
But it's the place where the initiate ascended and became a star.
Yeah. And that's through the the third eye and the crown chakra.
Because the Great Pyramid, the different chambers in the Great Pyramid itself represents the brain.
Oh, okay.
And so the different chambers, like the Queen's Chamber, they call it the Queen's Chamber.
Yeah.
The King's Chamber. they represent the pineal and the pituitary, the male and the female.
Wow.
The glands in your head.
And there's an area called the pit, which represents the thalamus.
Mm-hmm.
Those three things collectively together in the brain
Wow.
activate secretions which activate what's called the third eye,
Wow.
DMT.
which then opens the crown chakra for the ascension, which takes place in the sense through the apex of the Great Pyramid.
The missing
one of the
pyramidium.
one of the things that Jesus was referred to was not just the cornerstone that the builders rejected, but the chief cornerstone. And a chief cornerstone is a pyramidion, is a capstone. There's no capstone on the Great Pyramid.
They took it away.
So Jesus is the capstone of the Great Pyramid. It was the stone that the builders rejected. Where's the capstone of the Great Pyramid?
It's in another dimension.
That's it, exactly.
And it's solid gold. But in the other dimension it's not.
So
Monatomical.
So beneath the Giza Plateau, literally there's a labyrinth, and again, this is for another podcast because there's a lot in it, but there exists then beneath the Giza Plateau and the Sphinx and that is of course the halls of Amenti.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yes.
The sphere of Amenti. And it's the place where all of the above and below, the inner and the outer, all connect.
Yeah.
You know, as one.
Wow.
So, you know, I personally know, myself anyway, that, you know, what's referred to as the Tower of Babel and Jacob's Ladder and the Stairway to Heaven is all referring to the Great Pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and the Tower of Babel is all referring to language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the confusion of languages.
Probably.
But again, that's another thing for a whole podcast. So yeah, I think we'll leave it at that for this one. And
it's all the seals of the Nile.
that's the 7 seals of the Nile, yeah.
7 seals, this correlating
Which,
to
as
the
I said,
7
relate
chakras.
to the 7 chakras, 7 days of the week, the time-space matrix, the 7 notes, but it's not just about the 7 notes, it's about
And it's the net.
sound and matter and cymatics.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's a lot in it, and it's, as I said, there's, you know, you'd be here all night to go into that thing again.
Basically just meditate on anything that speaks to you.
Yeah, just really, on the evolution, I suppose, or movement through each of the chakra and centers. But so look, we're going to wrap it up there anyway now. And what I will say is that I will be taking journeys to Egypt. So if you you know, fancy coming on any journeys, you can have a look at the site, and there'll be dates up there for when journeys are planned. And the site is flowerlight.com.
Yeah.
So
Be working your way through these seals. The temples that we're talking about.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. So anyway,
and you can join us.
look forward to the next podcast.
Definitely.
And love to all, and happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Love to all. To all, good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.